He was saying some statements about a person's prime, and he was saying that Hearns and Leonard were not in their primes. They were in their physical primes, but not in their primes. That's bullshit, Mr. Montero. And so I'm not going to entertain rubbish. Okay, let's make it straight and plain. Your prime is simply where you are at your physical best, where mentally you're okay, you're normal. Okay, so if someone, for instance, gets brain damage, all right, they're not going to be in their prime. They may be in their prime years, but they may not be in their prime after that. They may not function the same way. Okay, so punch drunk, as we say. Okay, so that is about it. You may get injured as well, and so you're not able to use your limbs like you used to, and in that case, you won't be in your prime because you're an injured fighter. That is a sort of permanent injury that really affects you, your legs or whatever. Okay, so you can't move like you want to. It's all about physical ability at the end of the day. See, Mr. Montero, you can learn skills, you can improve as a fighter, you should throughout your career, continue to learn new things. But what is limited in boxing is your physical ability. When you're at your physical peak or when you're at your physical best, those are your prime years. That's when you're in your prime. It has very little to do, even though we talk about performances, but it has very little to do with how peak your performances may be. You may be out of your prime and give the best performance of your life. Shay Mosley versus Antonio Margarito. That is a classic. That is, according to Shay Mosley, his best performance. He was nowhere near in his prime. Okay, so it's not just performances, it's your physical capability. Okay, now somebody can be in their prime years. Okay, maybe give prime performances. And then they go into a slump. Shane Moses is a perfect example again, with Vernon Forrest and then with Winky Wright. But then he comes out of the slump. He's not in his prime anymore, and he just tears through 5 different opponents and gives tremendous performances. So your prime is not, it doesn't really necessarily have to do specifically with your performances. It has to do with your capability. You may have more physical capability in your prime than you did out of your prime. But some boxers are able to utilize and maximize the capabilities they do have and be able to compensate for the capabilities they no longer have that they used to have in their primes. Okay, Shane Mosley, I'll use as a perfect example. Shane Mosley was in his prime at lightweight all the way up to welterweight. Okay, and when he went to super welterweight, he was still in his prime, but a bit after the Winky Wright, when he was in his 33, I think he was 33, 34, he came out of his prime. Okay, now even so, primes deal with different people, but he came out of his prime. He still was performing at a very high rate. He was a little bit sloppier. He arced his punches a lot more. He kind of more jerked his punches. He wasn't as fluid as when he was in his prime. You can see, just look at the performances, and you can see what a young prime fighter looks like. And prime fighters are young. They're not, people say, well, your prime is 28. No, 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 my friend. Your prime begins in your early 20s. Okay, 22, 23, you're in your prime. I mean, you just look at teenagers and then you look at, but you have to get your man strength. So that's why we say your prime is generally in your 20s, 30s. So 22, 23, depending on the individual, you're coming into your man strength, but your coordination, your movement, the fluidity, the everything that you could think of, your capabilities are enormous. That's the beginning of your prime. The ending of your prime, everything has kind of faded away, deteriorated, many injuries, whatever. And so you're not as fluid, you're not as capable physically as you used to be. All right. But for the great ones, they're able to compensate for that. They're able to make adjustments and they're able to do great things. And I really think that I just want to make this statement because I think this is a very important statement to contribute to the boxing community. Somebody's in their prime. That's cool. But I really actually value the fighters who have come out of their primes, extended their careers, and performed at the highest level. I think that's a hell of a lot more difficult to do than just being in your prime. and soaring. And then when your prime's over, you're not soaring anymore. Another thing I want to say is that primes vary in length, mainly because it depends on your durability. So prime has to do with the number of fights you had. If you've had 200 fights in 8 years, okay, you're prime somewhere in there. But at the end of the day, you had so many fights that it had so much wear and tear on your body that you're not going to be able to do some of the things that you were able to do when you were younger. Okay. So it's all about wear and tear on the body that really determines when somebody's in their prime and when they're not in their prime. I hope this isolates the issue because people use the term in their prime and not understanding what it is. You can be in your prime, but not as experienced and not as versed in boxing as a senior veteran in the sport. Okay, Canelo was in his prime when Floyd beat him. Keith Thurman was in his prime when Manny Pacquiao beat him. Yes, he had an arm. He was coming off an arm injury, and he had a tune-up fight just to see how he was doing. But by and large, he was in his prime, and he was at the top of the boxing game. You can be in your prime, and nobody knows you because you've just been losing and losing and losing. But your performances have been better than when you came out of your prime and you was just completely shot, right? So we have to understand what in your prime is. It has a lot to do with your physicality. No matter what you say, it has to do with your capability in the ring. So when we talk about performances, it's not necessarily the win or the loss. It's how you performed in the ring versus the rest of your career. Okay. But even so, I take Juan Manuel Marquez. I take Shane Mosley as examples. I take Bernard Hopkins as examples. I take Floyd Mayweather even. Yes. And Manny Pacquiao even. I'm going to say this. Manny Pacquiao beating Keith Thurman was a greater win in his career than him beating Miguel Cotto, Marco Antonio Barrera, Josh Clottey, Shane Mosley, all those fights. You know why? He was out of his prime when he did that. That's why we look at Roberto Duran when he beat Iron Barkley and we value it so highly because the guy's out of his prime. His physical capabilities have diminished significantly. Okay? Mayweather beating Canelo was crazy. It was crazy because, again, this is a 36-year-old guy. Pacquiao was a 40-year-old guy. Duran was a 38-year-old guy. 37-year-old, I think it was. And you're past your prime. Duran's best years were, I think, when he was 30, 31 at most. So he was like 6 years past his prime. Floyd was like 6 years past his prime too, because his prime year ended for Floyd because of his hands and his shoulders. It ended for him by Ricky Hatton. I mean, Marquez, you could say Marquez's fight was pretty good too, but he wasn't throwing combinations like he used to. And that shows that he was not capable of just doing that all the time because his hands had broken down so much. With Pacquiao, we can tell when he came out of his prime, the Brandon Rios fight was his best fight. That was his last prime fight. And you look at the Timothy Bradley fight, yes, he's still going and wrangling, but his punch output had decreased dramatically. He was only doing like 400, 500 punches a fight after that. It dropped significantly. He was doing like 700 something punches per fight before that. And then it just dropped significantly. Pacquiao was not the Pacquiao that we knew. And he started to gas out in the middle rounds and stuff like that and get back his wind. So you can tell when a fighter is capable of doing things that he used to do when he was young. He had all the vital force, and that's when you're in your prime. Okay, so I hope people will say, when you say a prime performance, you can say, okay, so you can use, because prime means number one, it means peak. Okay, so you can say a guy had a prime performance out of his prime. You could say that too, right? That shows that, he had a peak performance, a high performance. But by and large, prime refers to a person's age. It really does. It refers to a person's age. When we say somebody's out of their prime, it's because they aged so much. That's why we say a guy looks old in the ring. He looks old in the ring. That means he's shot, really. He's looking old. He's looking his age in the ring, right? So, Evander Holyfield looked his age in the ring against Belfort. Right. And so that's what we're talking about. I hope that we can educate each other on boxing because it's really necessary that we get these terms and these things correct in boxing. because it's sort of almost like it's an arbitrary term, and you can give it the definition for whatever you feel like, and that's not how boxing is. Boxing's not like that. You can't be training somebody in boxing as like, oh, a jab. Well, a jab is just you can throw your right hand, and that's a jab. Yeah, if you're in the southpaw stance, ain't no other way. You know what I'm saying? You can't be telling an orthodox fighter you throw the jab with your right hand. What's that? Orthodox fighter? There's no such thing, right? So you have to understand that we can't be arbitrary with these things, and we can't just be changing what prime means. Okay. And it's very important. Prime, the word prime is, I believe it's a Greek word or whatever, and it means number one. So when we say prime, we're talking about the best of you, a best of your performances, right? But it's not necessarily that. It really refers to the prime years. It's talking about when you're most capable of doing those things, all right? And you can have better performances than when you were in your prime, strangely enough, right? But they're better not because you had all your capabilities, but it's because you probably knew how to outsmart a fighter, and so you did it. Take, for instance, George Foreman versus Michael Moore. That's a hell of a prime performance. That's a prime performance. It's incredible. Okay? George Foreman versus Michael Moore showed us that some boxers can have longevity and they can literally win championships way past that time. Now, Bernard Hopkins surpassed that by showing us, you could be a multiple world champion, and that experience really plays a major key. And if you're defensively sound, that experience carries you to being a consistent world champion way past your prime. I mean, Hopkins was far removed from his prime, right? We talking, the guy's 48 years old. His prime ended somewhere when he was, when he was 20, 29, 30, 31, maybe 32. His prime was gone, right? Physically, his capabilities had declined a long time ago. But at the same time, he knew how to compensate for that. His fighting style was such that he knew how to compensate for that. And he picked a fighting style that would preserve him for so long. Okay? Bernard Hopkins is just a remarkable, when we talk about great light heavyweights and great middleweights, this guy was both. And that speaks volumes for him, right? In his career. But my point is, you got to know what this thing means. And a lot of people say, well, this guy's just prime performance. That I see all the lashback on things I say on here, right? I say that Evander Holyfield, that fight was stopped prematurely. And I know what I saw, and I know I'm right. And I see everybody saying, oh, he should never have been in the ring. And everybody's going with the usual narrative. He should never have been in the ring against. Why shouldn't he not be in the ring with it? Why? This man has done boxing his whole career. Why couldn't he not be in the ring? Now, if the guy was tagging him up with free flush shots, I would have been like, okay, but he was covering up. Yeah, one or two shots got in, but he was covering up. He knew what to do. And he told y'all he knows how to defend himself. So the ref jumped in prematurely. He was panicking, 58-year-old man, don't want to see him get brain damage, and he jumped in when he shouldn't have. Okay, that's the truth of the matter. Now, nobody's going to complain too much because it's a 58-year-old man, but this is what's happening in boxing. We can't have this happening in boxing, right? And I'm going to give you all a little tip on how a ref can jump in. I know I'm just a fan, but I'm a very observant fan. How do you know when a boxer's in trouble and you don't want to get one too many punches that will hurt him, right? So the guy's teeing off on Holyfield, all right? There's going to be a shot, and you can't jump the gun on it now. There's going to be a shot where Holyfield is going to get hit, and you're going to see how he reacts. That's what you're looking for, his reaction, right? Now, when Holyfield got caught with that small little uppercut, he was still cognizant, and you could see that, all right? The ref jumped the gun because as he got popped up the center with the uppercut, that's what the ref saw, and he jumped in. When he got popped with the uppercut, he didn't watch to see. Clearly, you have to be so composed and you got to be watching. You can't be adrenaline pumped. If you're so adrenaline pumped, you're going to jump at everything, right? And you could tell the ref wanted to jump in since the first knockdown, right? And even when Holyfield hooked and he hooked himself out of the ring, you could see the ref was like, he was really worried because this guy's coordination's off. I get it. But gotta understand why Holyfield's coordination's off. He hadn't been in the boxing ring in a long time. He hadn't dealt with that kind of speed in a long time. So you have to give him a chance to acclimatize. You gotta at least let the guy get his chance to get himself together so that he could fight the fight. And that's why you got to be fair to the fighters, man. And I mean, too early is better than too late. Oh, we totally agree with that. Holyfield's going home to his family and everything. He's safe, right? But at the end of the day, it looks like Holyfield just picked up a paycheck and he didn't really entertain the fans. And people are thinking that this is just a flaky fight. And the only way for Holyfield to make that right, and I know this is controversial, is to actually go and fight in the ring again and show that he can do something. But I would prefer if he fights somebody who's around his age. He's almost 60. He's in his 50s. Find somebody, whether it's Mike Tyson or somebody else older enough, Buster Douglas or one of those guys, right? Get him in shape. Because you guys don't understand what boxing does for these guys. They love the sport, okay? And it wasn't an exhibition, ladies and gentlemen. It was an actual fight. It's supposed to go on Holyfield's record, I think. But anyway, here's the thing. Let him go in the ring with somebody his age. It doesn't make sense going in with a young, strong fighter who's like 44 or whatever. That doesn't make sense, okay, to me. Now, he went in. He did his thing. The guy caught him. He covered up. The fight stopped. The ref stopped the fight. These are the facts. He needs to go in with a senior person. When we talk about legends, we shouldn't be pitting, well, again, it's up for debate, but we shouldn't be pitting somebody who's a different age bracket with somebody else. Take, for instance, I would never want to see Sugar Ray Leonard going up against Floyd Mayweather. I never want to see it. He's too old for Floyd. Floyd, the fight would end up just like how Vitor did with Holyfield. It's just not a fair fight, you know? And Vitor, I don't think Vitor punches that hard, to be honest. But he did land a pretty good body shot, but other than that, he didn't really land anything on Holyfield that I think Holyfield realized that. But you don't have to be a puncher. You know, you just have to be super sharp. Leonard going back in the ring, I would like to see him against Thomas Hearns. And the reason I like to see him against, I know Thomas Hearns has some problems and stuff and health problems and stuff. But you got to understand something. You put somebody back in their element. You let them relive their element. It really adds value and life to them. And these legends, that's all they want to do is just throw hands. And even if it's just throw, I think this is what extended Muhammad Ali's life. Just him going in there, doing little exhibitions and stuff. It's not all out exhibition, but just to live in that element again. And if it's an exhibition, it can be controlled. So as far as their conditioning and their abilities are, they can go back in the ring and duke it out with each other. I would love to see Thomas Hearns versus Sugar Ray Leonard 3 as an exhibition. I don't know about you guys, but the nostalgia is awesome. All right. And I don't think we should take it. It doesn't do anything to boxing. It does not take away from boxing. It adds to boxing. We get to see our legends out there. Okay, Holyfield got knocked down. Some of you guys are feeling butthurt about that. I don't really think much about it. He's a 58-year-old man fighting a 44-year-old. What do you expect? You know? And yes, I thought Holyfield would have handled himself. But at the end of the day, he's 54 years old, okay? And he's in great shape. And as a 54-year-old, he did very well as a 54-year-old. You know, we keep on forgetting these guys' age, right? And he just wasn't used, you know, certain things he wasn't used to. And he'd gotten slower. And his coordination was a bit off. I thought the ring was a bit spongy. But other than that, you know, he would probably handle his own. He would be slower. Definitely significantly slower, but he would have handled his own, I think, in there, especially with his defense. He would have covered up quite a lot and weathered the storm, and he would have been able to figure out what he needed to do. I really, truly believe it. Just looking at the psyche of Evander Holyfield, I know that's the kind of person he is. And maybe he doesn't get the rematch with Vitor, or maybe he does in an exhibition or something, you know. But at the end of the day, let the old guys, if they want to do it, let them do it. It's dangerous. All you have to do is take the necessary precautions. And if it's an exhibition, then guys, don't go all out. I mean, at times you're going to go all out, but dial it back. When you're dealing with a legend, you don't knock out legends, man. And so but I think this was a professional fight, so Vidar went all out on him. But when you're talking about you need to have some respect for them. If you find that you're touching them up too much and you might knock them out, then don't knock them out, man. We gotta have respect for the people who went before us. They work so hard, and we pattern ourselves after them. We borrow things from them all the time. This is what people don't understand. Okay, there's another thing I want to say. Um, a legend in the sport, right, is a national treasure. That's why people say Floyd was disrespectful for saying he was better than Muhammad Ali, which is true. And I don't think it was disrespectful, but it is what it is. They're national treasures. And why we give so much respect to say a Sugar Ray Robinson or Benny Leonard or, Muhammad Ali or Jack Johnson, even though he had been disrespected quite a lot, and, or, Rocky Marciano, etc. Why we give them so much respect is because they were able to add elements to the sport of boxing, elements that younger fighters today we copy. We copy what they do. Okay, we copy what they do. So that is why the sport is better for them. As Mayweather or other people would say, they laid the foundation for the fighters today. The fighters today are benefiting from the foundation that they laid. Because of them and the inspiration that they had, we have younger fighters that borrow things from them all the time. They steal stuff from them all the time. All right? So that is what you got to understand. That's why if legends go in against each other, cool. Now, I'm not mad at Vitor for not, getting the stoppage against against wow, he just slipped my mind. Wow, I still can't remember his name. That's crazy. Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield. I'm not mad at it because it was a pro fight. It should have been an exhibition. It was not an exhibition, apparently. If it was an exhibition, then he shouldn't have gone for the KO. Should have let up on him and let Holyfield do his thing, because an exhibition is to display the skills of the legends. Where Roy Jones Jr. went up against Mike Tyson, I thought Mike Tyson took it a little easy on Roy at certain points because he wanted people to see what Roy could do. And at times we saw glimpses of the young Roy when he was leading with his left hand, and he'd lead with his right hand, and he would lead, and dance around the ring and walk around the ring, right? And you saw Mike Tyson. We saw what Mike Tyson could do, right? And the truth be told, that is what an exhibition is. Okay? An exhibition, yes, sometimes you knock out fighters. Okay? You can have it. But it's really about showcasing the skills of the legendary fighters. If you have two legendary fighters in the ring. Okay, that's what an exhibition is. Now, this fight that happened, I didn't see it on BoxRec, Holyfield on BoxRec's record, but I think it's an actual fight because Oscar was going to fight the dude in an actual fight, and I think Holyfield came in to replace him, and I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be an actual fight and not an exhibition. But if it was couched as an exhibition, then I believe sanctioning bodies or the athletic commissions, I think. Sanctioning bodies don't need to sanction it, but I think athletic commissions have to at least give an okay of a certain degree. Now, if it was a pro fight, which I think it was, that's totally different. A pro fight, they go at it. And so if Holyfield went into a pro fight with the guy, then Vitor is supposed to do what he did. And there's nothing I could say about that. He beat his ass out the ring. It's what it is, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm saying to you guys is, and neither the guy was in their prime. But age does matter in boxing. Age does matter. That's why what Pacquiao did is great.